This is a demonstration of the Delta Trigger. The Delta Trigger Plus gives you 5 to 5.5 pound trigger pull, which is as light as you can go with the factory trigger pack by doing modifications to it. I'll show you this. And this actual physical trigger bow here is called the Amp trigger. That doesn't have anything to do with the performance of the Delta trigger. It just happens to be a cool looking accessory. So that's not necessarily part of the Delta trigger, just so you know. Here's our newest trigger pack. This gives you about a 4.5 pound trigger. It's very crisp. And it's entirely drop safe. I've integrated a drop safety in here, and it has yet to be actually dropped from I think it's 3 or 5 meters is the official test. I have yet to actually do that, drop it top, bottom, left side, right side, front and back. But all my testing so far, the drop safety works, which is quite the project. I'm also got the same pack here. This is would work in the FS2000 as well, but I'm going to just demonstrate the smooth pull it gives you here. See that it's focused. That's what we're looking at with this one. Here's the Delta trigger pack. You'll notice it has an attached metal rod. Way back in 2005, we pioneered the improvement of PS90 triggers by lightening the springs and shortening the hammer, so you have a shorter reset distance. And we never would have imagined selling these improvements without this rod to prevent accidental discharges when the weapon is dropped, because even the factory PS90 has this problem where even when it's on safe, you can drop the weapon and it can fire. This rod makes the weapon safer because if the gun is on safe, it cannot fire. The main features of the Delta trigger is, as I said, a lightened mainspring and a modified hammer. And again, you see these as aftermarket accessories now, but I absolutely wouldn't recommend using those outside of the Delta trigger system, because when you lighten that spring and when you modify the hammer, the risk of accidental discharge in the PS90 only becomes greater. I should also plug this Delta trigger a little bit more while I'm here. It also includes the creep killer. That's this device back in there. It limits the pre-travel and the back travel of the trigger, and also shores up this, I call it the sear carriage, this sear here side to side. And when I do the Delta trigger, I do one at a time, and I polish up all the bearing surfaces. You get a real, professional gunsmith hand-tuned trigger with the Delta trigger. And furthermore, if you're thinking about improving your PS90 trigger, I recommend the Delta trigger. This item here that I demoed, that's going to give you a higher performance trigger, little snappier and a little lighter weight. This is going to be a pretty expensive item. It has inside of it a $200 to $250 Hyperfire style AR-15 trigger, and then there's all the parts to adapt that into this PS90 trigger pack. So I'm thinking this trigger job here is probably going to cost in the ballpark of $500 to $550, and it really doesn't give you that much more than the Delta trigger does. It is better, but it's not, hundreds of dollars better.